This will be in two parts. Sorry about that hiccup. At least it's a night lecture. Let's see if I can get some light here. That wrongdoing is an error of judgment, not having sufficient knowledge of the full consequences of one's actions. While there is a case to be made for this interpretation, the failure in knowledge I propose is not so much in the details of decisions, motivations, actions, events, and consequences, as in the failure to recognize the ontological interdependence of individuals existing in a world defined by radical contingency. The failure in knowledge of the amoralist is a failure of misrecognition. Not an epistemological failure against the rules of logic, but a failure to recognize the relational ontological structures underpinning existence. The antidote to this misrecognition is not to be found in rational cognition and arguments, but rather in attentive percipience, a form of care. This proposal is the underlying direction of the discussions and arguments I now present, engaging with a number of noteworthy thinkers along the way. Two, the philosophical roots of care. The ethics of care initially emerged from the inadequacies of male-oriented approaches to moral theory to speak to women to that personal and particular concerns as women with a different manner of being in the world. While the history of this style of thinking reaches back at least to sentimentalism, care ethics as a known philosophical school was launched with the work of Carol Gilligan and Nell Noddings. Within current feminist scholarship, there is some controversy surrounding the work of Gilligan. Some have accused her of essentializing women's experiences. It is beyond the scope of this paper to address this accusation fully here. However, suffice to say that I do not think this is the case. There are known facts, both biological and socio-political, that female bodies experience, undergo, and suffer situations that male bodies, for the most part, do not. Gilligan's work, in my view, is not only attuned to the feminist project, but is arguably crucial to it to the same extent as the work of other groundbreaking women thinkers. Mary Wollstonecraft, Jane Addams, Donna Haraway, Joan Tronto, to name but a few. Also, it would seem that this criticism springs from a concern to defend what is claimed to be a non-essentialist form of gender identity. That there can be entirely fluid identities. Untied to the realities of the biological body. a kind of untethered consciousness that seems to be in danger of replicating all the problems of the ghost in the machine as interrogated by Descartes. What is without question is that Gilligan's groundbreaking critique of Kohlberg's stages of moral development in a different voice galvanized what is now recognized as one of the principal approaches to ethics across diverse domains. That care ethics has withstood the test of time is a testament to its pertinence, and it continues to evolve with the work of women and men philosophers who, as Annette Bayer expressed it, stand on the shoulders of us older ground-clearing women. Bayer explores the philosophical affinities of the ethics of care with the work of the Scottish sentimentalist philosopher David Hume, and she uses these commonalities to support and enrich the critiques of feminist care ethicists against the mainstream rationalist views. Hume famously exposed the impotence of reason in confronting the amoralist standpoint, declaring, "It is not against reason that I prefer the destruction of half of the standpoint. The destruction of half of the world to the pricking of my little finger. The preference is entirely within the domain of sentiment, not reason." Due to Hume's foregrounding of sentiment and the particular, Bayer describes him as the women's moral theorist, proposing that Hume turns out to be uncannily womanly in his moral wisdom. Hume champions sentiments over reason and rationality as the basis for ethics. He is concerned with the cultivation of the capacities for sympathy or fellow feeling, rather than the reduction of morality to the dogmatic adherence to rationally determined rules or principles. Nonetheless, the sympathy he promotes is one susceptible to the constraints of reason when conflicts inevitably arise in our diverse sympathies. Sympathy and sentiments, while paramount for ethical insight and motivation, are not sufficient for a full ethical theory. Anticipating phenomenologist Edith Stein's early 20th century work on the problems of empathy, Hume writes, "When I am at loss to know the effects of one body upon another in any situation, I need only to put them in that situation and observe what results from it. But should I endeavour to clear up after the same manner any doubt in moral philosophy, by placing myself in the same case with that which I consider "'tis evident this reflection and premeditation would so disturb the operation of my natural principles, as must render it impossible to form any just conclusion from the phenomenon." Standing in the shoes of another, while potentially useful in awaking sympathies to appreciate the other's experience, is not entirely reliable. it is still the subject standing in the other's shoes, and with this come all the expectations, life history, personality, and unconscious biases of that subject. The exact experience of the other remains inaccessible. We might only approximate it, or may even potentially distort it. Nonetheless, what still stands is our susceptibility to sympathetic interconnectedness, and this is pervasive in Hume's account of morality. Revealing both mutual vulnerability and mutual enrichment. Hume's writings are moreover replete with very particular illustrations from life. Not with abstract absolutists' pronouncements. Therefore, we can see there are commonalities that are key themes in both sentimentalism and the ethics of care. Feeling, emotion, personal connections, situatedness, and vulnerability as against the rationalist ethics focused on autonomy, rules and rights. Gilligan reflects on the difference between rationalist and sentimentalist approaches with the lived experience of women. Since the reality of connection is experienced by women as given rather than as freely contracted, they arrive at an understanding of life that reflects the limits of autonomy and control. As a result, women's development delineates the path not only to a less violent life, but also to a maturity realized through interdependence and taking care. Simply, Gilligan here is giving formal recognition to the fact that we are born into sociality, into connection. While for men the circumstances of birth are still determining nonetheless, we cannot deny that the opportunities and freedoms afforded men have historically and culturally been more expanded than those of women. The circumstances of birth and of giving birth confront women directly with the realities of connection, interdependency, and contingency. Men are able to avoid and ignore these realities. So are more susceptible to building rationalist dreams which may be co-opted for violent ends. And this is why Gilligan can say that women's moral development is likely to lead to a less violent life. The idea of a maturity grounded in recognition of the interdependencies mentioned above is developed in specific directions by a number of later thinkers, such as Tove Pettersen, who highlights the importance of reciprocity within the caring relation. Both carer and the one cared for must be attended to in the care. We can say then, the care must be recipient appropriate, and that self-sacrificing care is not a viable option. How true. I will put a point there and make a summary conclusion, sort of. I thought it was most invigorating and refreshing to see David Hume, the Scottish philosopher, propounded as being a sentimentalist. And why not? I do agree. This is not coming from reason. And why at all should we be so harsh and make a limitation where reason ends and sentimentality, irrationality, if you like, takes over? Is it true that Hume was actually overcome by his sentiments? I think not. I think he's still the good old David Hume. He's just using both his heart and his mind. And what he says makes a lot of sense if we are wholesome in our perception. Another Scottishman who is becoming even more popular than even David Hume was, Ian McGilchrist, says that when heart and mind goes together, both rationality and emotions go hand in hand. That's a possibility, I think. So care can come from both sides at the same time. There is no necessary exclusion. And I think attention, which I'm pretty sure Anya is going to get into pretty soon after this rather cumbersome introduction, and that is that a different attention, it's a different ontology. We change, and when we change, that is indeed a moral decision. And that is in definite opposition how the situation is in philosophy in Sweden. I kid you not, Sweden is one of the few countries in the world where morality is a completely different institution, department within the university, and rationality or philosophy or theories and science is another one. They are materially separated. That is taking it a bit too far, I would say, making it ludicrous. It never made, not even to me, I trust you. Trust me, I was a very stern, logical positivist once upon a time and a Popperian, but it didn't make any sense to me at all to say that the world was one subject and one's morality another one. And I think it pushed me to reject that absurdity in the other direction. So I will always be thankful I studied philosophy in Sweden. Could have been Finland as well. They do share that peculiarity. It pushed me in the other direction of thinking that another world is another morality. Not the same things, not the same colors, not the same objects even. Et voila! You've entered quantum mechanics. So, Anya, you do have a point here. Might there be a comment from my dear colleague Kalle here? See how we can arrange light. there you go. Comment or question or whatever.
Good evening, good evening.
I will take this one out.
Good evening, good evening. Thank you. It was an interesting paper. By this lady at University of Tanzania. Her name was Anya DalyORCID, and Hume is one of the few philosophers who prefer, so to say, sentiments over reason. That's remarkable, don't you think, Hans? Yes. Oh, indeed, and I remember that he had this. There is a Latin term, post hoc, which means after this, that is informal fallacy. That is, example is, the rooster crows immediately before sunrise, therefore the rooster causes the sun to rise.
Oh, yeah.
So this is the post hoc informal fallacy. But I think that Hume was a little bit mistaken there from quantum physical perspective, since in quantum physics the observer can actually make things happen. Yes, I know it's a ridiculous comparison, but it's not really a ridiculous comparison. So on one hand, I like Hume because he puts forward the sentiments. But to be deconstructive, you have to put reason and sentiments at the same plane. So that was my point. Do you want to say something concluding, Hans?
Yes, you are pointing to quantum physics, and it wouldn't surprise me if Daly is going in that direction later in her paper, and I'll be very glad to come back to her, and I think it's very suitable for night lectures. It's an easy read, and she writes in a very lucid and clear manner, but there is a certain aesthetics to her writings which is really appealing to me, makes it easy on the tongue. I say thank you very much for your patience and have a very good night. Bye bye.